Welcome back to transitioning to Angular 2.0. In this next step, step 4, we're going to decompose our directive into smaller components. This is a common theme for application development, where as we start to learn more about our component-based directives and how they're going to interact in our application, we look at ways that we can decompose them down further and so that they're more reusable. So when we look at this project here, we just created our news directive and we created our people directive in step 2. However, the one thing that's common between these two is they both have this container and this certain look and feel. And so with that, it asks, we ask the question of like, why are we having to recreate this container structure each time and potentially get out of sync between how the look and feel is. So the first thing that we want to do is refactor that out, and we'll just start with what the people directive is doing here. So this component, as you can see right here, as I'm highlighting, we've got really everything up to here. We've got all of our structure for what this container is. And a little bit down here around the footer and whatnot. However, this is really our container. So it has a title. It looks like it's getting a color applied to it, and it does some stuff with text center and whatnot. All right, so great. Let's go ahead and start refactoring this out. And we're going to go ahead and create a new directory called container. And inside of it, we're going to go ahead and create a few files, just like we have before. Container.directive.js, and then .spec. And let's kill the text in these. All right. And let's create our module. And last, let's create our HTML file. All right, fantastic. So we have our standard 4 files. Again, notice how everything is self-contained. Everything that we need for this directive is right here. The HTML, the directive, the spec. One of the additional things that we'd add at a later date is the end-to-end testing for this directive so that we can test it completely independent of everything else, the rest of the application. This allows us to write super fast tests that don't take a lot of time to execute because they're not depending on everything else. We can drop the directive onto our web page and then test it with multiple browsers and know that our directive works the way that we anticipate. All right, great. So again, actually, let's go over to our module first. We're going to use an IFE. All right, we're going to use use strict and Angular module app components container. Great. There's our module declaration. Let's go back over to it. Let's grab that really quick. Save ourselves a little bit of typing, and I'm going to go ahead and add it here. All right. So now, same thing. We're going to go ahead and define our directive. All right. So Angular module. Oh, didn't need the quotes. There we go. And no, we don't need that. Let's go ahead and .directive container and container directive. Excellent. Copy the name of that. Now we're going to go ahead and create our named function that will define our directive. It will return restrict element based again. Let's see here. Give it our template URL and app components container.html and scope we're going to come back to this because that's something that's going to be a little different on this one as we start to use our scope, our isolated scope, and be able to pass in values to our directive from the HTML. All right, so our controller is going to be the container controller. There we go. We're going to use controller as. Again, we want to eliminate scope. We want to use view model instead. And this is going to be important now. Bind to controller set to true. So again, what that does is anything that's passed in on the isolated scope will automatically get bound directly to VM so that we don't have to have an additional step to manually handle that. All right, so let's create another named function called container controller. All right, great. And we'll just do our standard var VM equals this. And great. So now on the isolated scope, if we go back and we look at what is in the people directive HTML, notice they're passing this title and they're passing a color. So we want to have that happen as well. Let's go ahead and actually remove this code out really quick. So we're going to go ahead and let's put these down here. And we're going to go ahead and just remove this out. Oh, I think we're missing. Let's just back this up a little bit. All right. Yep, okay, I see my mistake. Let's go ahead and cut that there, paste there, and cut. I like to keep the code nice and formatted, and clean. That way, come back to it later. It still works and looks nice, and we'll go ahead and paste this in here. Great. And all right, inside of here, now for the purpose of this, and I don't recommend this, however, for this video demonstration, we're going to go ahead and put our people directive directly inside of here. This is a common technique that's used. It's one directive's containing another directive. Definitely, we do not recommend this. However, for the purpose of this lesson, it will help us to understand why we don't do it, and in the next video, we will refactor this out. All right, so the next step here is we want to get rid of this here. We don't want to have this hard-coded to violet. It's great that it's violet. However, it'd be great if we can then pass it other colors and make this more reusable. So what we want to do here is go ahead and remove it, and we want to say ng class equals vm.w color. All right, well, where does that come from? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. The other one that we want to do here really quick is we want to do vm.title so that we can pass a title in. Again, where's this coming from? Well, we know that we want to get a color and we want to get a title and we want to pass it to the directive. I keep selecting the wrong one. Okay, so let's go ahead and add these here. Now, this says I want a title and a color. All right, so what this allows us to do is pass on the isolated scope. It will expect a title and a color to be passed in, and the @ symbol says that they're going to be of type string. If they're of type object, then we pass an equal sign. So if you need more information on that, look up isolated scope and you can learn more about the different types. All right, so now what we need to do is go ahead and go to the dashboard HTML page, and now we want to do container instead. And title, we want to set the title to people. and we want to set the color equal to violet. All right, great. I think, yep, our web page is hung up here, so we're going to go ahead and close those out, stop the project, reserve it back up, and ta-da. Well, sort of. It's very hard to see. However, we do have people, the text is there. We don't have the actual color. So what happened? Well, the good news is that our new container directive correctly renders the people directive, and our container does look right, except for the color. All right, so the challenge that we have here is that we're actually passing it in as just color. However, on the container directive itself, well, actually not on the container directive, in the container HTML, it has W color. Well, if you remember, we'll look at the news version here really quick. The news version, it's passing W green. So not just the color green, it appends a W to it. So that's why we created a W color. And so for this to work, we want to say vm.wColor equals W plus VM color. Great. Let's refresh it. And ta-da. There's our purple color. All right, fantastic. So in this video here, we showed how we can decompose an existing component-based directive into two smaller directives, albeit not exactly a reusable technique, because now the news directive here is feeling rather lonely because he has to create his own container, and our container's not really reusable. And so what we want to look at next is how can we make our container reusable by using transcludes so that it can be decorated with other directives. So until then, have a great day, and we'll see you at the next video.